We are back, and we are diving into moves to make. Zach, you're here with me. We both got moves to share. But before we get into those, I hope you guys enjoy the video. Please leave a like if you do. Comment down below what you think of these moves. What moves are you guys trying to make as we creep ever closer to the NFL draft that is ahead of us? Rookie drafts beyond that. It's an exciting time to be in dynasty leagues. But of course, if you want a little bit more excitement, check out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in on that 7-day free trial. Get in that Discord. Check out some bonus podcasts while you're there. And if you need that much more help getting your roster straightened out, check out the roster reviews in the pinned comment below and the YouTube description box. With all that said, all the promo in the book, Zach, I'm kicking it to you first. Let's get to the content that people came for. What is your first move to make this week? What do you got for us?
Well, Bob, this is not so much a specific move to make as much as it is gathering yourself to make moves.
Sure.
What I'm trying to do at this point, look, we're in April. We made it. Like, congratulations. Everybody clap. Woo, we did it. We're here. I'm going to be hanging out with you in a couple of weeks. We're going to be doing some draft work. We're here. And for me, a lot of moves have already been made.
Sure.
So what I'm doing now is finding out what moves have I been afraid to make. What moves have I said, I'm just not sure if this player is entrenched in that position yet? And with that list of players, Bob, I'm waiting until I would say the middle of day 3, or even I would feel most comfortable after like round 4 to start looking at some of these moves and sending out offers. Now, look, I'll give you one example, Bob. Somebody that I've just been too afraid to invest in just yet is Javonte Williams, the Denver Broncos running back. Javonte Williams, low-key, had a really good season last year. A lot of usage in that offense, and I would expect the same moving forward. I just don't know if there's somebody else there to siphon carries or targets away. Look, Jaleel McLaughlin's not the guy that I'm worried about when it's probably going to be a more run-heavy offense than it is a pass-heavy offense, unless the Denver Broncos go up and get like Drake May or Jayden Daniels, which I just don't foresee happening. I'm looking at a team that's probably going to be a little bit more run-heavy next year, try to slow down games and not let their opponents score 35 points, so then they have to throw the ball. And I think they're going to try and control the clock more and just make it more of a defensive, grinded-out type of game. I don't know if they get their quarterback in this draft, so maybe that feeds into it. But like, if the Broncos, Bob, don't make a move in the draft for a running back, say by round 4, day 3, I will be sending out a few offers for Javonte Williams. I'll be looking at teams that for me, it makes sense to buy him, a more competitive build, and go out and try and get Javonte at a fair deal. Now, you could look at that two ways, right? This can work for players who you want to sell, and maybe you'd have to sell at a little bit less of a value right now because there is the whole draft discussion. And and I don't have a specific player here, but there are players that fit this build where their teams don't make a move. A good one from last year is Rachaad White, right? Everybody's, Rachaad White, they're definitely going to bring somebody in. He's not going to be the running back. Leonard Fournette just left. And no, the Buccaneers did not make any other moves in the draft for running back. So what players can I sell that their value increases by their teams doing nothing in the draft? So the move that I'm making, Bob, is gathering that information now and have it ready to send out on day 3. Day 3 is rounds 4, it's round 5, round 6. You get a lot of the fluffy stories on day 3 of the draft and the players and half the guys we've never even heard of, right? They're from like Alcorn State University. You're like, what is this? In that time, I'm going to start looking at my sleeper app, my teams, and this list of players. For me, it's headed by Javonte Williams, and see what players I can buy that I feel secure in buying, or players that I feel like I can sell at a better value because their position has been entrenched by the lack of moves via the draft.
I like this point a good bit. I think just having the foresight to kind of look ahead, see what moves you can look into. And I do like the Javonte call. Honestly, he's been one that, as much as I have in the past, and situations are situational, I'll be mentioning that a good bit in this video. Situations are situational. So you have to take a look, and he will be a free agent running back, but you look ahead at the free agent class next year. Not anywhere near as crowded as it's supposed to be, or as it was these past 2 off seasons. You look at the free agent classes ahead of this year in 2025, you're looking at guys, Nick Chubb, good running back, James Conner, good running back, Aaron Jones, good running back, old good running backs, can find a home, sure. And then maybe you have guys like Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, who are on club options currently, could be picked up for that 5th year because they were first-round picks. Other than that, though, the free agency class for running back next year, A.J. Dillon, Ramondre Stevenson, Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams, if he has a good year this year, is going to be the belle of the ball. And especially if Najee Harris and Travis Etienne are holdovers, picking up that option as well. So I like this shout out there. That's one that you have to look back and all the discussions we've had about this running back class that, hey, it's not shaping up to be the best running back class ever. We got to temper expectations. I don't see a lot of the guys in this class coming in and beating out Javonte from day one, maybe next year, but Javonte might not even be on the team. Like I said, he's going to be the bell of the ball when it comes to next year's free agency class. Unless we see, unforeseen cuts, that can always happen. But love this call, love the concept, love the foresight, Zach. I like this shout out so much by you, Zach. I decided to go check out some values for Javonte Williams from recent trades, pulling from fantasycalc.com/database, checking out trades that have actually happened in leagues, actual values as close as we can get. And I'm looking through 25 trades that have been made in the last 3 days. Not a single one you are paying a first-round pick for Javonte Williams right now. There's a handful where you're paying 2 seconds, Deebo Samuel. If you are paying a first, you're getting somebody like Brian Robinson back, so you get some extra flexibility to your running back room. Will Levis is in there. That's a super flex league. All these, I think, for the most part, are super flex. There's a couple, one quarterback in there as well. But, I don't think it's too much to go get Javonte right now. And I think you're kind of buying that injury dip from, him having that slow year back. And it should have been well known that he was going to have a slow year back. So I really like this shout out by you, just the situation itself, kind of forecasting ahead, but also individually. I like this player shout out. And I think, like we discussed last week, you kind of touched on right now, really cheap time to go get running backs. So with that said, speaking of going and getting running backs, you got to right some wrongs, Zach. I am all out to go get myself on some Kyren Williams shares. I'm going to get more. It's time to shut up and buy Kyren Williams and stop with all the nonsense.
Let's go.
Of, all the reasons not to sell and look at the reasons to sell. Now, again, as I mentioned before, situations are situational. I will play both sides of this argument. Absolutely sell Kyren Williams if you're rebuilding and getting a first-round pick plus. By all means, you don't need that running back right now. He is on, 2 more years of his contract, and then who knows? We'll talk about that in a little bit. Sell if you're already deep at running back but need help elsewhere and you're gaining help at positions you need more depth in, startable depth in. Fine, I can get behind that. Sell if you're getting something stupid in return. Somebody stupid good, that is, in return. Don't sell for bad stuff. Bad stupid. Sell for good stupid. Somebody in the comments the other day said that they sold some combination of Tyreek Hill and Kyren Williams for it was Justin Jefferson and another decent enough running back that is close enough to Kyren Williams' value. And it's like, okay, yeah, absolutely go make that deal. That's fine. That's just not the case. But do not sell because of day 3 draft capital. Do not sell because Sean McVay might leave. Do not sell because Matthew Stafford might retire. There's other reasons to sell. I'll get to those in a minute. But why do we want to go buy Kyren Williams, Zach? Because Kyren Williams is good. Shocker, news alert. Looking over last year's stats, among 35 qualifying running backs with 165 plus carries in 2023, aka running backs that mattered, top 3 yards per carry, top 4 total rushing yards, top 6 in rushing touchdowns, top 10 in yards per catch or yards per carry after contact, top 10 in missed tackles forced, top 20 in total receiving targets, top 25 in receptions, all of that while missing 4 games. He logged the second fewest games out of all of those 35 running backs. A question mark for the Rams over the past couple of years, their offensive line. They've added offensive line help this offseason. On top of all this, and listening to what NFL teams are telling us, they've neglected running back in free agency. And as everybody loves to say, this running back class is bad, or at least not great. Take your pick. So who's coming after him? Who's coming for his job? If they add someone, they'll profile more as a compliment than any other type of bell cow in this class, in my opinion, at least. And I've said this too. I kind of hope they do bring in somebody, give somebody or bring somebody in that can spell him a little bit to let him be very much more efficient as opposed to running the guy into the ground. Let's, help with his longevity and some other things that we'll talk about. So He's got 2 years left on his rookie deal. If he's not extended before he hits free agency, Kyren Williams will be hitting free agency at the ripe age of 25 and a half years old, still well within his prime. And since I'm able to handle both sides of this argument, provide pros and cons to Kyren Williams, that way everybody can make their own informed decision at the end of the day, that's fine. Just acknowledge all sides of the argument. That free agency class in 2026 is currently projected to be very crowded, unlike the 25 class. So you're looking at Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, if they're both extended with their fifth-year option past the 25 free agency class. Then you got Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Rashad White, James Cook, along with some ripe old vets in Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, Dave Montgomery. But overall, Kyren Williams will be the third youngest of the entire bunch, and this is assuming that no other running backs get extended in that time, and that there could be some that get cut early. We know that's always a thing that you know, the running back class kind of thickens up, but it also kind of retracts with players getting extended before free agency starts. So that's always a possibility. My biggest, if you want to have any real red flag on Kyren Williams at this point, in my opinion, if you want to do anything, chalk it up to injury history so far in the NFL. Missed a large chunk of his rookie season due to injury, missed 4 games of 2023 due to injury. And the latest injury that I think most people missed was the broken hand he suffered in the end of the playoffs, because the playoffs happened. They were gone. He was done. It was at the very end of the game. Didn't miss any actual game time. He's just going to go get his hand fixed and be fine. It's still an injury, and we don't expect it to hinder him coming into next season. But if anything, this just means you should prioritize the rookie they do possibly draft. We don't even know if they're gonna. They might just roll with Ronnie Rivers and the ghost of Zach Evans at this point. If they do draft a rookie, get them on your roster, pick them up for cheap, because nobody's going to be, unless it's an early day 2 pick, which I doubt happens, they're just going to rock with Kyren and whatever other player as a spelling piece, unless Kyren does get hurt again. Looking at recent trades per Fantasy Calc, again, guys like DK Metcalf, Jordan Addison, T. Higgins, DJ Moore, all straight up for Kyren Williams. As for draft capital, you're probably looking at a pick in that 108 to 112 range, plus a second-round pick in 2024 or 2025 to go buy him. I get a lot of wanting to sell or avoid Kyren Williams is the longevity. We all want out of Dynasty, but at some point you have to give up the longevity a little bit for high-impact points right now. If you are a competitive team outside of the top dollar running backs, Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan, CMC, I don't think there's better value out there right now for a running back that in a great offense. You might only get 1 to 2 years out of them, but again, with running backs, you shouldn't be really projecting beyond 1 to 2 years anyway. That's my thoughts on Kyren. Zach, I know you love Kyren as well. What do you got?
Yeah, it's been really frustrating to be on the other side of this. And so to have someone else championing this cause, oh my God, it feels so good. It really does. It really does, because it's frustrating. You know, listen, I love Nate, love Mike, and they're always talking about selling Kyren Williams. And I'm like, but why? Like, why do we do this thing in Dynasty where anytime somebody comes out of a place we didn't expect, we sell? And it takes like 3 years of production for that to change. Like somebody that's now changed 100% is Amon-Ra St. Brown. But do you remember the dialogue around Amon-Ra St. Brown after his rookie season? Sell, sell, sell. This is not going to happen. He's a day 3 pick. This, that. And it's like, but did you not watch? Did you not watch what happened? And the team was so much better when it ran through Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's the same thing with the Rams. They were so much better of an offense when Kyren Williams was there. Puka Nacua was great. That team was better when Kyren Williams was there. You cannot argue with those results. Go look at the wins and losses. Go look at the games where Kyren wasn't there. And go look at the games where Kyren was there. They were a much better team, a more competitive team when Kyren was there. And so for that reason alone, I go, well, wait a second. Like, surely these people who are much smarter than us see that, right? And I don't know. Maybe they do bring in somebody else. We were doing a discussion the other day in the Patreon, Bob, where we were discussing bringing in competition. And this was before the legal issues that are abound, which are unsolved as of the recording of this, with Rashee Rice, where it's like bringing in competition doesn't devalue Rashee Rice. And that's what the community does. Same thing with Kyren Williams. They're not going to bring in somebody day 1. I highly doubt they bring in somebody day 2. And sure, maybe they do bring in somebody day 3. I'm not scared of that. Like, take some work away from Kyren. Sure, give him 85% of the work that he had. Maybe he stays healthier,
Right.
And then you look at the team and their needs, and like they just got a huge gaping hole on the defensive line that they have to address at some point. So, that's another part of projecting players' fantasy. Like, oh, are they going to address wide receiver? Well, what else do they need? So I would expect the Rams to address defensive line, like with 2 of their first 3 picks. I don't even know if they have their picks in the first 3 rounds or whatever it is. So I love this. I'm so happy that this was somebody else saying it. And we're doing this with Brock Purdy too, right? It's like we are tempering the value because there is no security. And I think that's fair. If Kyren Williams got a Saquon Barkley type contract with the production that he had last year, he's worth like 104, 105. Yeah. But he doesn't have that contract. And so that is baked into his value. That's why he's worth the 108 through the 112. And maybe we could even make that now the 109 through the 112, because maybe the 108 is joining that first tier. But that's why his value is what it is instead of more, because he doesn't have security. So there's an opportunity where maybe he does have security in 2 years. Some running backs just got paid. So I'm so happy. And I really don't like how we do this. And I voice it every time. I voiced it when we were doing it with Puka. I voiced it when I think I had just joined the channel when Amon-Ra was being discussed about. It's like, why? But why do we do this? Like, yes, some players are going to have a one-hit wonder. We don't have to sell every time that happens. We can try and, like I wasn't a big seller of like I'm not perfect. I didn't sell my Dameon Pierce shares. I wish I did. I'm not perfect, but like I didn't see a reason why to sell, and I don't see the reason. I didn't see it with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I was vehemently against selling Puka, and you know that. And I'm much in the camp of buying Kyren Williams. So thank you for it being you who said this. It couldn't be me because I've said it so much already. I'm just glad that somebody else did this point. I'm really appreciative of it, Bob.
Yeah, I part of it probably boils down to me being a Kyren truther, through and through. Since he was a prospect, I've been a fan, and that always helps when you're in on the prospect to begin with. And I know that, if it's easy to kind of plug and play and, find that confirmation bias sometimes, and it's easier to do that. But I think ultimately, like you said, I think at some point we need to come around sooner. At what point does it change that, from outlier to this dude's just here to stay? Because absolutely, Kyren is an outlier for everything that in his most everything in his prospect profile. Terrible combine, not great draft capital, outlier, 100%. But the thing is outliers do exist. They don't make a rule, but they are an exception to the rule. 100%. Puka Nacua is an outlier. There's plenty of outliers that say at some point, like, why do we need to do this? And like I said before, if you're getting great value, stupid returns, stupid good returns, fine. If you're flipping to fill another position while you already have our running back depth, fine. If you're flipping because you're in a rebuild or you just won because Kyren won you your championship and you want to flip now to retool to set up for a longer run, fine. But at the end of the day, don't sell for the wrong reasons. Don't avoid for the wrong reasons. Buy for the reasons that, hey, he's just a really good running back, and that's okay. It's okay to be good, and it's okay to buy to have good players on your team and stick with good players on your team. Zach, we're moving on into your move to make, or your second move to make, excuse me, before we get into some certifying moves to make. Zach, what do you got here? This is awesome. I love this point. It's great to do this time of year. What do you got?
Yeah, this one it's not the biggest move ever. Sure. And this is what I'm doing at this time of the year. I'm looking at my roster and seeing where can I trim the fat or where can I address a very small need. We've obviously been making moves for the last 3-4 months in our leagues. Free agency has come and gone, the bulk of it, and a lot of different players have landed in spots. Some we didn't see. Some of these players have just absolutely no value to us anymore. So what I'm looking at doing now, Bob, is examining my roster and trying to see where I can make small transactions that help me move dead weight and make sense for other owners to do. And this works both ways. You can sell players and you can buy players that way. We all have players in our rosters that their situations changed. The hope of recouping the value is dead and gone. Like, it's not there. I'll give you a great example, Jimmy G. Jimmy G is a great example of this. A year ago, he was slated to be the starting quarterback of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now he's suspended for the first 2 games, and he's the backup to Matthew Stafford. The value has totally changed. So if you held on to Jimmy G, or you inherited a team that has Jimmy G as an orphan owner, or even if you drafted Jimmy G in like the 29th round of your draft or whatever it may be, can you move him to the Matthew Stafford owner? Matthew Stafford has had injury problems the last few years, not major problems, but he's missed a game here or there. Last year, Brett Rippon played a game or 2 for Matthew Stafford. So can I contact the Matthew Stafford owner and say, hey, what's your last pick that you don't really care about? For some teams, it's like 4, and the 4th round, 5th round, whatever. Can I get that pick? I don't even have a dialogue around that. I just send a trade. And I pulled one off the other day. I sent Jimmy G to the Matthew Stafford owner, and I got 410 back. And I'm like, you know what? I was doing nothing with Jimmy G. He's probably out of the league in 2 years. It totally makes sense for that owner, who's obviously relying on Matthew Stafford to be one of his starting quarterbacks, to have Jimmy G, who's not Brett Rippon. Jimmy G he can start a game or 2. He can fill in a week or 2, just based off the fact that he was starting the Super Bowl a few years ago. So he can definitely do a modest job at filling in. So for that owner, it made sense to have that security if there's a week or 2 where Matthew Stafford misses time, as opposed to having the 410. And those are the things I'm trying to do right now, Bob. There are several players that fit this category. It's not just quarterbacks. Some good ones are the running backs, right? The running back situation in Chicago changed. They signed DeAndre Swift in free agency. Well, now Khalil Herbert, if he's on your roster, you don't really know what to do. I'm contacting the DeAndre Swift owner and saying, hey, do you have a late third, a third next year? Or, maybe a player that makes sense for me to ask for in return. So I can say, look, this maybe Khalil Herbert starts 2 or 3 games this year. Who knows? I can't bank on him starting a bulk of the season. He makes more sense for you to have on your roster than for him to clog my roster in hopes that he becomes a starting quarterback. And then on the flip side, can you do this to help yourself out? I did this in our Rewinders League, Bob. I have Brock Purdy. I'm a big fan of rostering my starting quarterbacks that have valuable backups. I had to find the right way to say that. Like, I wasn't rostering Patrick Mahomes and then Chad Henne 2 years ago. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you have a Matthew Stafford and a Jimmy G, that's worth having the 2 of them. So I have Brock Purdy in our Rewinders League. Joshua Dobbs just signed there as a backup quarterback. Josh Dobbs had top 5 fantasy weeks this season, filling in for like 2 or 3 different teams. So there's value to have that in case something happens to Brock Purdy, which, let's not act like the San Francisco 49ers quarterbacks have been, the model of health the last few years in the NFL. And so I made a move in our Rewinders League. I offered the 408 for Josh Dobbs, and it got accepted. So now I have Brock Purdy, and if Brock Purdy goes down, I have Josh Dobbs, which is much better than whatever I was going to get at the 408. So can you make these small moves for your teams to either shed some dead weight or pick up insurance policies on your team that don't really cost you all that much? You'll notice by the moves that I'm making that, for the most part, the bulk of my teams are set, but I'm trying to configure, certain things, depth pieces, insurance pieces, injury help, or potential future buys based on what the draft does. So I think for me, this is where I'm at in my rosters. We got 2-3 weeks until the NFL draft. Then more movement and momentum is going to get going in my leagues. But right now, I'm just trying to shore up, can I cut some dead weight here that, maybe I get 1 or 2 weeks out of Khalil Herbert next year. But I'd rather roster a running back that has a potential at a higher ceiling, like any rookie running back in the draft this year. Maybe they only fill in 1 or 2 weeks also, but maybe they become the Kyren Williams of their team too. So I'd rather have that than just carry Khalil Herbert and hope he gets. And I'm hoping for a DeAndre Swift injury so that Khalil Herbert is relevant, and even maybe a Roshan Johnson injury, because we don't know how that backfield shakes up. So just these small moves that really shore up my roster or trim the fat.
I think there's a lot to break down in this. You mentioned that it's kind of, it's small moves. It's nothing earth shattering, 100%. But we've touched on this a lot, is the power of compounded consistency. And when you make these small moves regularly, consistently over time, they make big impacts down the road. When you're able to consolidate your roster into less pieces, so you're not ever cutting dead weight to the waiver wires, or if you are, you're doing it as little as possible. Um, and I think another great point to this, or another way you can utilize this tactic, is by just consolidating any rookie picks you have. By, instead of necessarily getting a straight up pick in return, you're getting an improved pick. So maybe you're moving, instead of, just for an example, picking off the pick that's on my screen right now that you listed, the 410. Maybe you move whatever player you're trying to move with your own 410, and you're moving up to the 405. Even if it's a small increment, you're not going to be moving rounds up the boards with these types of players, in my opinion, most of the time. So when it's a clear image of, hey, this guy's entrenched in the backfield, he's and not in a good way, he's down the pecking order, not at the top, or these quarterbacks, whatever the case is, you're not going to get a great return. Some return or some improvement is better than none. And one way you can approach this for yourself, or you can kind of try to sell this to your league mates, is by the cheapest time to buy handcuffs, whether it's quarterback or running backs, is before you need them. Because when you need them, then there's a premium. When that quarterback or running back is activated, instead of paying a 410 or moving back a few picks, you're paying second, early third round picks for somebody that you could have had much cheaper with little loss. In these trade downs, you're still picking with a pick that's just a little bit later, a handful of picks later, maybe a half round, maybe a full round, depending on where the picks are, and the players involved, obviously. But just a way to manage your roster is a great thing to do before you need it as well. Another thing that before you need to make those roster consolidations, before you have to make those roster consolidations after the NFL draft, before your rookie draft, when you're in your rookie draft, be as ahead as you can, so that when your league mates go to your roster and they see, oh, X person is X over the roster limit, they have to cut 8 players. You lose some leverage in that argument, so you don't have as much wiggle room to make trades. They'll just say, hey, I'm either going to pay this, or I'll just wait till you kick them to the curb, to the waiver wire, and I'll get them for fab later. So, and hey, if you can sell for fab, that ain't bad either. We've had discussions on this too, Zach, is selling for fab isn't always the worst thing. We're going to take a look at completed trades directly from our Discord. Some have been made by our patrons. One of these trades has been shared via a league that they're in. They saw a trade. We wanted to touch on it. I wanted to touch on it specifically, but I'm sure you did too. But either way, we're going to get into this, decide what side we like, if we need to fix the deal in any way, if we feel like one side needs a little bit more value to make sense. We're going to see what we can do to adjust the values. And I did put a quote here, something that's been on my mind, seeing some of these Patreon trades or Discord trades, or in the advice column, the trade advice. Sometimes you can prefer one side. You may prefer one side, but that doesn't always mean that the value is right on the side that you want. You kind of have to make sure sometimes that the value still shakes out. And I think some of these deals, we prefer one side, but the value is not correct. We need to, fix the deal. Maybe we want the sexy rookie pick in exchange for our veteran, but at the end of the day, the value doesn't make sense selling that veteran at that cost. We'll get into more specifics on those as we go along some other time, probably in more detail. But the first one, Zach, I want to send your way. Our patron bought Mark Andrews for K. Dotton and the 202. How out on Mark Andrews do you have to be to sell Mark Andrews for K. Dotton and the 202, Zach? What do you think on this one?
I feel like, as actually somebody who bought a few shares of Mark Andrews throughout the injury to try and flip, I'm noticing that the community is not in on Mark Andrews right now. And so this is a great trade for the person who bought Mark Andrews. It's going to take one game for that value to just shoot right back up. Everybody's on to Sam Laporta and Trey McBride, and rightly so. I think those guys belong in the conversation, but that doesn't mean that Mark Andrews all of a sudden doesn't. And so I think this is a great job at buying low on Mark Andrews. And I do like K. Dotton. I do. But I am not relying on K. Dotton to be a tight end 1 for me. He can have those tight end 1 weeks, but he can also have tight end 37 weeks
Right.
in a league where there's only 32 starting tight ends. So great job buying Mark Andrews here. I love it.
Yeah. What do you think you have to add to the Kate Otten side to really make this right? If somebody has Kate Otten in 202 and doesn't want to go and strike up a combo with this as their starting offer, what do you think an appropriate starting offer would be for Mark Andrews, given the structure we have a little bit?
I think either you can have 202 and a tier down at the tight end position, or you can have Kate Otten and a first round pick, probably like 109,
Okay.
110.
Yeah. I think
I'd want to be in that second tier of players, and I'd want to choose my player in that tier, whether that's Brian Thomas, whether that's a quarterback, whether that's Jonathan Brooks. I want to be able to choose my player instead of either take who's left or start selecting from the third tier of players, which is about where 202 is. If I had to replace the tight end, 202 and David Njoku.
Okay. What about Evan Ingram? You think that's enough?
Absolutely.
You would? You'd still do
Absolutely.
that? You think that's a more fair value trade as Evan Ingram plus 202 for Mark Andrews?
I would be very, very happy if I got Evan Ingram and the 202 for Mark Andrews.
Okay. Yeah.
Very happy with that.
Yeah, I almost think you might have to throw a third kicker back on Andrews for that in 25 or something. But either way, moving on. We are on to our second deal. So that deal was certified. Definitely go buy Mark Andrews, knock on some doors, because Mark Andrews seems to be going for cheap, or at least in that one deal. And that, these are all singular deals. They're one-off scenarios. There's thousands of leagues out there. But the thing is if one person's willing to make the deal, like you said, it doesn't seem like people are super in on Mark Andrews right now. Hey, go knock on some doors. The worst thing that'll happen is the door gets slammed in your face once you say hello. But let's talk about trade number 2. Nate, our good old buddy Nate, across the screens from us over in good old Baltimore. Nate sold Gabe Davis and Ramondre Stevenson for Jayden Reed and the 402. What do you have for this one?
Wow. This feels even both ways. I do prefer getting Jayden Reed, though.
Sure.
But I feel like this is even. Like getting Ramondre Stevenson, you're probably buying just for a year, although I'm expecting some work to be taken away from Ramondre Stevenson because Antonio Gibson is there, and he's a better catcher of the ball than Ramondre Stevenson is. I think this is a fair trade, but I would much rather have the Jayden Reed side. Everybody's doing this thing with Jayden Reed, by the way. Super annoying. Like, whoa, we don't know the pecking order. Yeah, you do, man. Like, Jayden Reed's a top 2 target on that team. There's no reason to expect anything else. I don't care if Christian Watson is healthy. I'm not expecting him to ever play more than 5 games in a row. You can attest to that. He might have the same hamstrings that Greg Dulcich has.
They're both sharing one.
Yeah, like why is everybody worried about the, I guess for lack of a better term, the volume of weapons in Green Bay? Like Jayden Reed is the best weapon on that team in terms of the pass catchers.
Heck, even with the running game now. I mean, as much as I like Josh Jacobs, Jayden Reed is a spark plug to that offense. You see him get the ball in his hands, it's a different energy. It's a different vibe.
Yeah, and they're designing plays for Jayden Reed.
And they're fun plays that, quote unquote easy gimme plays, and say, hey, go take this ball and go do something with it. You love to see that for wideouts. And the thing with the site he sold, Gabe Davis, maybe he does better in Jacksonville, but I think he kind of is what he is. Ramondre Stevenson, not the sexiest name in this next running back class. Maybe he doesn't need to be, because like we said, or in the running back free agency class, I should say, to clarify, maybe he doesn't need to be, not super crowded, still an older quote unquote prospect. But I'll take Jayden Reed on this side 100%. Great move by Nate. Love this one. Not selling Kyron, and that's what's important here. So another move by one of our patrons, selling Joe Burrow and the 109 for Trevor Lawrence and Puka Nacua. What side are you on this one? 2 young quarterbacks, 2, some would probably still say top 8, top 10 quarterbacks. Depends where you have Lawrence slotted in at this point. There's kind of a love-hate situation going on with him. But then you get that Puka Nacua top 5 dynasty wide receiver, top 6 dynasty wide receiver, depending on who you're talking to. What do you think of this one, Zach? Joe Burrow in the 109 for Trevor Lawrence and Puka Nacua.
Yeah, I'd say this is pretty fair both ways. I would rather have the Trevor Lawrence and Puka Nacua side. If that 109 was 108, I might change my mind, because there could be instances where JJ McCarthy goes in drafts 107 and Brock Bowers goes 108.
Sure.
So if that was 108, I would probably not want to do that. So the fact that it is 109 and it should be the first player in the second tier, at least as things are projected now.
Sure.
I'm not off the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon. I don't know why a lot of people are. We as a community don't like to give context to situations. He was very hurt last year, and very banged up, and still like. Do you remember the game where he like almost broke his ankle?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
he
where
came out like
everybody
5 days
panicked.
later and he's still playing. I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I'm not off the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon whatsoever. And as a matter of fact, I am happy to move off Joe Burrow because Joe Burrow has had several years with injury concerns. As a matter of fact, like every preseason he's hurt. And it really bleeds into the start of the regular season every fantasy year. So I'm happy to do this and pick up what I think is a comparable quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is going to be in this league for another 10 years, not going anywhere.
Sure.
I don't know why we are talking about Trevor Lawrence as if he's like a mid quarterback. He's not had the best situation around him. Just 2 years ago, they were 2-15 or 2-14 in the regular season. And I know that I think they made the playoffs last year. That might have skewed everyone's perception a little bit, but they're a much better team than they were 2 years ago. And Trevor Lawrence is a much better quarterback than he was 2 years ago. So I like this trade. I think it's really even both ways, but I'd prefer to have the Lawrence and Puka side.
Yeah. Personally, I'd want that first round pick, that 109. I'd want it to be closer. Honestly, like the 106, 107 is where I'd kind of want that pick to be. I just give me the guys who are already producing in the league. I don't want to deal with whatever I get at 109. Joe Burrow, yeah, injuries are a thing, but like the difference between Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, is it that much of a stark difference compared to 109 and Puka Nacua right now? And I know Puka Nacua also an outlier. We've had discussions about outliers in this video. I think it's pretty handily the Trevor Lawrence and Puka Nacua side, either an earlier first round pick or maybe like an additional second round pick next year I'd want on the other side. Hey, I think it's a great deal by our patron here, picking this one up and getting this deal done. So certified for me, and I think for you as well. But let's move on to number 4. We sold Josh Jacobs and a projected early 25 first. We are a rebuilding team. For some context, we're a rebuilding team, sold Josh Jacobs plus a projected early 25 first for the 103. What do you think about this one, Zach? Certified, not certified? What are you thinking?
Just right off the bat, I don't like this. Then you provide the context of it's a rebuilding team. Did you just sell your own first next year? Because I don't love that. I don't love selling your first next year if you're a rebuilding team. I get it. Right now, next year's draft class looks a little bit more running back heavy. You can attest to this, Bob, more than I can. It looks decent for the running backs. It doesn't look good for quarterbacks. I get it. I don't love, like, you have now lost control of your ability
to clarify, it is not the first round pick. It is still probably a bad team's first, but it's not yours.
But that changes everything. That changes not having your own first round pick means you should never be rebuilding. You should never be trying to lose. You should be trying to win because you gain nothing from trying to not win. So that context changes everything. I would still like to get more on the back of this deal. I would like to get 103 and a third this year, or a third next year, or even both. Like, my first counter is 103, 310, and a 25 third. That's my first counter. And can I get one of those threes, or can I get a 3 and a 4? Some combination to where I'm not selling a 2-for-1 on a rebuilding team.
Yeah, I definitely don't love the consolidation of assets on a rebuilding team. Even when you got them, I don't hate the value. Ultimately, I would like to get something back to get that 2 for, or not make it a 2-for-1, like you said, to even it out across the board. Even if it's a second next year, or probably if it's an early third next year, happy with that too. Say they're moving the 103 this year and they're still picking whatever early next year as well, if it's projected early picks slots next year as well. But to touch on real quick, I just want to, just because you brought up on the concept of never rebuilding if you don't have your first round pick, always trying to compete. There is a caveat. Some words are harder than others. In my opinion, yes, going or trying to compete, but also still being mindful of the aging assets on your team that could be expiring or at least diminishing in value over time, and trying to move off of those guys. But ultimately not necessarily tanking your first round pick next year for somebody else. Even if you get something really cool in return, having that first round pick is almost like a cardinal rule of rebuilding, is having your own first round pick. It's the only pick you can really control. You can try to play puppet master with all the other picks and try to make other teams better than others and try to help other teams make the playoffs so that one team is better than another and the seeding changes and whatever. But at the end of the day, there's one pick you can really control. That's your own. Try not to move your own picks in a rebuild. That is, and with rebuilds and roster reviews, to pump those again, if you're rebuilding roster, if you are not a good roster and you're leaning towards having to make that first move into a rebuild, going and getting your first round pick for next year and the following years, if you've moved both, is always a high priority for us in those, and finding ways to go get those picks back on your roster where they belong. I got one more for you, Zach, before we head on out of here. And this probably goes to the testament of not panic selling. We do not know the full extent at this time of the Rashee Rice situation with his incident. We'll just call it that. We don't know. But we did have a trade come through, a league share, non-patron of ours, but did share from one of his leagues, a trade that went down involving Rashee Rice. And the trade was selling Rashee Rice plus a 25 third, don't know where it's projected, for the 203. And I think at the end of the day, whatever happens with his situation, there's little reason to sell at this point, because I don't think you're getting great value, even if Rashee Rice is locked up forever and thrown away the key. Yes, some value is better than no value, but I just would not sell right now. It'd be a hard hold for me. I would not make this deal unless you're getting the same value you were a week ago. Then I would, but I'm clearly not. Zach, your thoughts on this deal? Selling, holding? Again, we're not going to speculate too much into what's going on. We don't know all the details. So what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just based off the value, I definitely don't love it. I wouldn't do that either. I think this is the time that you hold and you hope for the best if you have Rashee Rice. To panic sell now, it could be a good move in hindsight, but it could be something that, in 6 months or 8 months, you're like, damn, I wish I didn't do that because he got a 6-game suspension or whatever it is. Like, he still should be, I would imagine, a member of the Kansas City Chiefs playing football at some point. Could be this year, could be next year. I don't agree with the panic selling. I agree with you with the value. I definitely would love to get something for Rashee Rice if I had him, but I wouldn't take 50 cents on the dollar just yet.
That's all. Just not saying to buy, just saying don't sell for, like you said, 50 cents on the dollar. Hold in these situations. Hope for the best. It sucks what happened. Don't want to downplay that at all, but I know there's questions out there. There's people still wondering what to do. It's a discussion that maybe doesn't need to be had at this level at this point right now, but at the end of the day, people are out there asking, and we're just saying, hold on, hope for the best. Again, don't love that it happened. It is what it is. Pray for the ones involved. Pray for the ones affected. But with that said, Zach, we're going to get the heck on out of here. Hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, please comment down below. Tell us what you thought of the moves we made, about these certified moves. Are you looking to make these moves or are you not? And above all else, be sure to check out patreon.com/Dynasty Rewind. Get in on that 7-day free trial. Get in that Discord server. Check out some bonus podcasts while you're there. If you want some help making some moves for your very own personalized roster, your roster that you already have, hit up the pinned comment below as well as the YouTube description box. But with that said, Zach and I are going to get the heck on out of here. We will see you in the next one. But until then, I hope that y'all have a good one.